This is the Bryan Hyde Show.
Well, hello there. Welcome to the show. It's Tuesday. That means it's my weekly visit with Eric Peters from Eric Peters Autos. Eric, how are you today?
I'm brushing up on my Spanish. How about you, Brian?
Yeah, might not be a bad idea. Who knew?
Me gusta. No, I am one of you. Do not kill me, please.
Yeah, I'm sure you've been watching, some of the developments and especially the unrest in Los Angeles. And I just have to ask you, Eric, have you ever seen our media less tethered to reality than it is right now?
Well, yeah, I have. Back in 2020, during the Summer of Love and the peaceful protests back then, they loved this stuff. It's fuel to their fire. It helps them. The thing that worries me is that this is going to metastasize into an excuse for law and order. Law and order. Give it to us good and hard. And I have the unfortunate dread that a lot of the people who wear red hats are going to be all for it.
No, that is one of the great fears that I have as well. Is that, as long as it's those commies, or whoever,
yeah.
The socialists or Antifa, as long as they're on the receiving end of the boot, you do see an awful lot of people who otherwise would identify as conservative coming out in favor of, we love our jackboots and we love government to be heavy-handed because they never believe it's going to be used against them.
Sure. And, what if this is another look, here's a squirrel moment, too? Remember before all this erupted, everybody was talking about, or a lot of people were talking about or noticed that this private data aggregation company called Palantir was apparently in bed with the Orange Man and these technocrats who want to privatize the security state to watch and keep track of and potentially punish all of our wrong thankfulness. And that has been eclipsed because, of course, now everybody's freaking out about all these rioters everywhere. And that's understandable. But, I think it's important that we not lose sight of the fact that this technocracy continues to advance. And the dispiriting thing to me is that it's advancing under the auspices of the guy that we voted for, those of us who voted for him, to get less rather than more government.
Right. Yeah, these are very perilous times in the sense that nothing is cut and dried. I mean, this could easily go off the rails and not in ways that, people are expecting. And the part that gets me is how these supposed uprisings for the 14th, right, the day that everybody's supposed to make their voice heard, are so clearly funded and planned and organized by someone. I don't know who that someone is, but this is not organic.
Yep. Yeah, once again, I've seen, now I can't verify, I don't know whether this was photoshopped, but there have been pictures going around, particularly on X, of pallets of bricks and cinder blocks being left in convenient places. Have you seen those?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Something that seems to appear magically before every disturbance. Huh, what a coincidence.
Yeah. Yeah, so, it's clear to me that this is contrived. I absolutely believe that this is being promoted and egged on by certain interests. And then the next question is, much as decent people don't like riots and property damage, all of that stuff, is it going to serve as the pretext for something that none of us who don't like riots and protests want?
No, I hear you. And it just adds another level of flavor to the dysfunction of our great big American family. But let's talk a little bit about what you and I can be doing in terms of, look, I'm keeping as far away from these protests as possible. I've actually seen some people on the right say, oh, good, finally it's a chance to go out and meet these people in the streets. And to me, that seems like a really bad idea.
A terrible idea on so many levels. Where do we even begin? Don't get into a fight if you can possibly avoid it. Most of us aren't Rambo in the first place. And in the second place, this sort of thing never ends well. If you've ever been in a bar-type situation, a bar fight, which most guys have, if you can avoid it, the best thing to do is to gather up your friends and get the hell out of there rather than get into the fight, because nobody wins when that sort of a thing happens.
Nope.
So there's that. And the second thing is, if that does occur, the left is going to be able to once again trot out the old tropes about, nationalist, white, racist people are out to get the poor brown-skinned people. And that's not going to serve the interests of decent Americans either.
Nope. I guess the takeaway here is be as skeptical as you possibly can about what you're seeing, what you're hearing, and maybe unplug from it every so often and take a look around you and see if life isn't more normal than you were led to believe.
Yep. You know, you and I were talking a little bit before we got on the air about just being outside in the real world and doing productive things and enjoying nature, listening to the birds, you know, tending our chickens if we have them. That sort of thing is a balm psychologically, emotionally. It's very calming. It helps to center us and it helps to diffuse some of this awfulness. You know, I was thinking about it the other day, how we have literally been marinating in this stuff now for 5 years. Remember when there was a time, and it was literally only 5 years ago, when there wasn't an imminent catastrophic crisis occurring potentially every single day. You could go weeks with just the usual, you know, there's politics going on, this and that, you know, this is sort of annoying. They're talking about doing this, but it wasn't like, oh my God, the world might end tomorrow. But ever since COVID, we've been in this just steady situation of constant panic, stress, fear, anger. And I think it's beginning to wear people out.
I can speak for myself and say yes. My nerves are a little bit frayed, and frankly, I'm getting tired of it.
Well, and we can opt out of it to a great extent. You know, not everybody, unfortunately. You know, I feel bad for people who live in downtown LA for, you know, one thing, but most of us don't live in that type of situation, and be grateful that you don't, and try to just go about your life. And I think if most people just go about their lives, maybe this thing will fritter out, because I think that probably it's a small minority of activists and the people who are funding them who are pushing this. And if we don't allow ourselves to be drawn into it, maybe it'll just burn itself out quickly.
Well, and this may be one of those places where my internal dislike of large crowds serves me well. But I'm just going to offer this advice, even though it's unsolicited, for anybody who wants it. It's when you're around large crowds of people, especially when they start chanting, it's time to go. It's time to get out.
It's time to go. And, you know, I'll wait for something else out there. I've been mulling about this, and I'd be curious to see what people think out there listening to us have to say about this, as well as yourself. I think that Trump, the way he's handling this thing, is to a great extent very ham-fisted and needlessly so. And what do I mean by that? I think that most Americans are not opposed to people who are just trying to work and earn a living, you know, wherever they happen to come from. I don't think people have a problem with that. They have a problem with the people who are coming here and expecting free things, benefits and services. That rightly irritates them, because people are having a tough enough time as it is, taking care of their own needs and the needs of their families, and they want it to stop. Well, an easy way to stop it is to say, look, only American citizens are entitled to receive government benefits, whether at the state or the federal level, period. And there should be a requirement that you have to demonstrate citizenship if you apply. If you choose to go to the government and say, give me something, you should have to prove that you're a citizen. And I think that would solve probably 2/3 of the problem, because the people who are here who are mooching and want free stuff wouldn't have it anymore, and they would have no more incentive to stay here, or they'd have to go to work. And we could do that without creating a police state. What do you think about that?
Oh, will you be running for president anytime soon?
Oh, please no.
No, you'd rather live a productive life, and that's why I admire you. Let's
thank you. Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. The lag in the phone sometimes does that.
I was going to say, let's shift gears for a moment. I want to talk about an article that I saw on your website that this hit home, because I was just thinking about this a couple of weeks ago. Whatever happened to aftermarket stereos? I mean, there used to be a time when, you know, the car stereo, that was a pretty important thing, but you had a great article about no more aftermarket stereo for you. How have things changed? Well,
the interesting thing is, you know, for a good period of time, for about 20 years, roughly from about the late 1990s all the way through circa about 2015, not exactly, but around that period, it was very easy, much easier than it had been in the past, to upgrade or replace whatever the stereo system was that your vehicle came with. For example, I have an '02 Nissan Frontier, so the thing's almost 25 years old. It's almost an antique. But it was very simple for me to pull out the factory AM/FM stereo with a CD slot, for those who remember those, and put in a modern stereo that has Bluetooth and all of the features. In other words, I could get all of the good things that you can get in a new car without having to buy the new car. You know, that's a huge, tremendous thing they made all the connectors universal, so almost anybody could install a stereo. You and I can remember back in the day when you pretty much had to go to a stereo installer shop, unless you were willing to deal with the wiring harness and cutting and splicing and doing all this stuff and getting it to fit. Much, much easier. Unfortunately, that has now changed. If you've been in a new car lately, you'll know that they have these gigantic LCD touchscreens, and the LCD touchscreens integrate everything together, not just the radio. In addition to that, there typically will be the climate controls, the apps, the GPS, so you can't just replace the stereo anymore. In a car like or a truck like my old Nissan, you could just physically remove the stereo and nothing else. Now you have to deal with this whole big touchscreen, and the thing is, even if you did that, it's probably not going to work because everything's proprietary, everything's controlled by the computer, and you'd have to go to a dealer, and you'd have to have the dealer flash it, and that assumes that the vehicle's manufacturer wants to let you change the stereo. So one of the effects of this is, let's say you buy the base trim of whatever you got, new car. Well, you're stuck with that stereo, and that's all you're going to get. You can't upgrade just the stereo, which you could have done a few years ago. You could buy the base cheap model and then put in the high-end stereo. You can't do that anymore because of the way they've integrated all of the electronics together into these LCD touchscreens that all the cars now have.
You know, somebody made the observation the other day, and I'll just offer this for your consideration too. They were like, you know why the Gen Xers are so upset? It's because we had to convert our record collection into an 8-track or cassette tape collection or CD collection, and now we subscribe for our music. So you don't even own your music; you just pay a rental fee, and you get to hear it streaming. And it seems like our cars are kind of following that same route.
Oh, sure. That's a general trend, and it's really, in my opinion, pernicious and malicious. You know, it used to be that you could buy physical software. Remember that? When you would buy like a Microsoft Office or something, and you got the CD, and you put it on your computer, and you could use it, but you could also give it to your kid later on, or you could give it to a friend or whatever. You know, in other words, once you bought it, you owned it. Now you license it. You know, and it's only allowed for your particular computer, and if you want to continue to use it, you end up having to pay another fee. And they do the same with everything else that they're trying to get us to just get on this endless pay-for-use model where you don't own anything. And it's just metastasized everywhere. Like you say, with regard to music, how about Kindle? You know, you don't physically own the hard copy book. You have this access to a digital copy, which of course implies that at any time they could decide to rescind your access to it. That's why I like and recommend hard copies, physical things that you hold, because if you hold it, you have control over it in a way that you don't have if it's electronic and it's in the so-called cloud, which really means it's just in somebody else's computer.
Amen. No, and this is one of the reasons why, among my most prized possessions, meager though they may be, all of my how-to books, whether it's on, how to build something around the house, how to fix something, how to garden, whatever, wilderness survival, I have hard copy books for that very reason.
Yeah, amen. And, you know, I almost feel sometimes like a monk preserving important literature and documents. I recently got myself a copy of both Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn because, you know, it has some politically incorrect terminology in it. And they are probably going to excise all of that and other wrong thinkful things, not just terms, but also ideas from these books. And so, you know, 50 years hence or even 5 years hence, we may find that books like 1984 are now cast in such a way as to have an entirely different meaning. You will literally love Big Brother, not in, I don't particularly love Big Brother. No,
I'm with you there. It's one way to fight back. Somebody asked the question, I think, online about what would you do if you woke up tomorrow and the internet was gone? And my first thought was I would thank the heavens above that I have more books than I can possibly read, because that's where I would be spending my time.
It's true. You know, it's such a sad thing in a way, because when the internet first came around, you know, in the 90s, it was very freeing. We had, oh, wow, look, I've got this at my fingertips access to all this information. And there were all these message boards and comment areas where you could just communicate freely. Now it's become very oppressive, very insufferable. And the same with all this other technology. I think we sort of passed that balance point where the benefits outweighed the liabilities. I think we're now well into the area where the liabilities are outweighing the benefits. And I think a lot of people, if they could click their heels together like Dorothy and go back to 1985, I think they would.
Hear, hear. So let me shift gears for just one moment. I just want to pose a question to you. I don't know how often you dine out, but have you noticed how expensive a simple burger and fries and drink has become lately?
Oh, absolutely, and that's why we don't go out anymore. I'll give you an anecdote. Dawn and I went. We had to make a short road trip. Short meaning about 100 miles away. And as happens when you go on a road trip, we got hungry, and so we both liked Chipotle. We hadn't been there for a while, so we went to Chipotle and got a couple of bowls. And I didn't even think about it. I didn't look at the menu. I hadn't been in this place in several years, and it was $40 for two bowls.
Wow.
And I mean, I was like stupefied into speechlessness. I couldn't believe it. I don't know how people are affording fast food any longer because, a bag at McDonald's, a Big Mac, fries, and a Coke, you could buy a prime rib for that. It's insane.
No, I hear you. And I'm always, convenience will dictate, when it comes to dinner. What would you like to do? Yes, it would be much easier to reach for the debit card and, place an order with Domino's or something and either go pick it up or have it delivered. But something about that return to home cooking is as distasteful as it sounds. Oh, that means work. That means dishes.
Yep.
But it also means better control over your pocketbook as well as the quality of food that you're eating. So maybe it's a good thing.
Once again, it's like, again, it's this balance. Convenience had its cost. There was a time when it was nice when you could go to McDonald's and for, $10, you could feed your family quickly. Get a bag full of burgers and you're good to go. But now it makes more sense, doesn't it, to go buy a couple of pounds of ground beef for the same or less money and make a much better meal and probably have some good leftovers for the next day.
Hear, hear. And there's also just that connection in where your food comes from. Now, I don't know if you garden. We've planted some tomato plants, and my wife's mom always does a pretty big garden. But there's something very satisfying in going and harvesting, what you have grown. And I don't know if it's as cost efficient as nipping down to Costco and grabbing, a flat of tomatoes or whatever. But there is a real satisfaction when you are connected to how your food gets to your table.
I agree with that, and there's an additional element now in that the food conglomerates are now nefarious. The stuff that they are putting in our food is, at the very least, something people should be cautious about eating, I think. Read the labels, look into what they're doing. There's almost no meaningful check on what they are doing to and putting into our food supply. And so if you grow your own food and if you know the guy down the road, the rancher, and you get, quarter beef from him, you know that your food is clean. You know that your food has not been injected with things that you're going to eat, and then it's going to be part of you. So there is that element to it, which I think is at least important as the empowerment that you're talking about.
Yep. It's, I'm not trying to urge everybody to become a homesteader and, go live off the land, but I'm just thinking prices are not coming down, and at some point, we aren't seeing it right now, but at some point you're going to see the people in power realize food is control, or access to food is control. And if you have the ability to tell them no because you've got some way of being more self-reliant in terms of feeding yourself, hey, that's all the better for you.
Yeah, and getting back to local is, I think, not necessarily going the whole Abner Doubleday homestead route. It's a matter of, at one point in this country, there were myriad suppliers of food, small all the way up to big. But now, just like the mainstream media, it is literally a handful of cartels that you could count on your left hand that control the majority of what you see at the supermarket. Even though they're different brand labels, those brand labels are all controlled by the same handful of companies. If you look into it, it's really appalling. And I'd like to see us get back to that more local and decentralized model that we had when you and I were young. And that was once characteristic. It was good. It was healthy. You had not only more choice, but you had that incentive to provide good stuff as opposed to cheap stuff, as is the case now.
Hear, hear. I guess the bottom line is this. If you want to live as a free man or a free woman, it's going to require some effort on your part. You're not just going to be able to sit back and ride the current wherever it happens to be carrying you, because there's a lot of upheaval and commotion and undercurrents. It's got to be your choice, and you got to choose to be free regardless of whether anybody gives you permission or not.
Yep. We're coming out of what was once a golden age in this country. We had almost unfathomable prosperity, and, ease of life compared to what other people had to live. And that's ending. And that's sad. But we have to come to terms with it. And I think if we do, at the end of it, we'll end up being better than we were during the golden age, the post-war age of the 50s, 60s, and even into the 70s.
Hear, hear. Eric, great as always to visit with you. Look forward to it. I feel like I come away a little more encouraged each week. Keep your powder dry, and we'll have a lot to talk about next week, I guess.
Will do. Thank you, Brian.
Again, that's Eric Peters from ericpetersautos.com. There's a link in my show notes. That's at thebrianhydeshow.com. You're looking for show notes for June 10th, 2025.
This is The Bryan Hyde Show.